Crumbs, I tell you. Crumbs indeed. Oh, it's all go. Hello. Oh, this is terrible because folks don't get to see this till much later, and everyone thinks I've died and gone to heaven or something because I don't put up videos regularly. Not that I would go to heaven, but you know what, you get what I'm saying. Anyway, just a second. Here we have Stuart's Epiphone SG, and I'm sort of in between a million different things, builds, jobs and whatnot, so it's all good and all go, but the lights are off, natural sunlight. I want to see what this looks like for a minute. So here we have, local to me, Stuart, came across my stuff on YouTube, then Facebook, and this guitar represents, it's quite a special one in a way, because it's one of those things that, you know, you have a guitar when you're young that's special to you, and then you kind of get married and something happens and you sell your first guitar to sort of pay for, you know, moving into a new home, that kind of thing. And that's what Stuart did, and then didn't play for a while, and then his wife said, get yourself a guitar, and this is it. A nice SG, Epiphone SG, set neck. The purist will have a go at me and say it's not the 400, it is the 400. I don't really care, that's the whole point, ladies and gentlemen. It's an Epiphone. It's beautiful cherry finish. It's actually nice and shiny, got a nice gloss finish all over. And what we've got is yeah, just the standard Epiphone, just a nice quality SG. It's got quite a tall angle here actually. I've not noticed this before, but they are actually quite, you know, quite a noticeable angle, like 4 degrees or something. But I like that, works for me. So we have everything works as it should. A few crackly pots, a couple of little dents here and there on the fingerboard, and this came from I think a local youngster who hadn't played it much, so it's in really kind of not unloved but unused condition. So it's here for a setup and to add some weight, and this will be the third SG I've added weight to in the recent weeks. In fact, almost in a week. But anyway. So while I'm doing this, I'm waiting for the doorbell to ring for a delayed pickup to be delivered so I can finish Mark's custom headless telly build, which is on hold until this blasted pickup arrives. And it's one of those things where guitars and keyboards put the thing in the trusted hands of FedEx, and they kind of, I looked it up. It was delayed basically, and I looked it up this morning on their tracking. It said delivered, so I went immediately into panic because I've got no spare room, I've got no leeway for this to get done. It's got to be here, and I've got to get it done over the weekend latest. Go away, Hornets. Anyway, so I phoned them guitars and keyboards, and lo and behold, they've said they incorrectly said that it had been delivered. In fact, it's ready for delivery today or something. Right, so anyway, a bit of relief. So the thing I just want to do with this, because since I make my own, I'm kind of keen to see what the actual thickness of this Epiphone SG is, and it's actually 38 mils. That is way more than my homemade one. I'm just going to write it down because I'm curious. I'm running at about 29 millimeters. Whoa! And it's still heavier, thanks to the Eki. Still heavier than the standard Gibson or even Epiphone. I think this is probably a little thicker than a Gibson one. I don't know, I haven't measured the Gibson one. But you see my Eki SG template. This will weigh just enough to balance it out. We're looking at 28, so it's 10 degrees, 10 millimeters less, but I can just about make it work, just about thick enough to make a guitar play. But it's an interesting alternative to the top-heavy SG. So for this guitar, I have an adjustable nut ordered, which should be here tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and do the setup without the adjustable nut, but I'll use the nut slots on this as my start point. They are very high. Actually, I don't need to do anything with them. I can do this leveling without that part of it done. Now, what's going to happen here is I'm going to add lead to the body. I'm going to give the pots a shot of you know, the stuff, electrical contact cleaner, because they're crackling. We will replace the nut with an adjustable Tusq one, and I'm going to put some lead in the back. So in a way, we might as well start the process with that as we go. So let's do just that, and then the phone will probably ring. And phone, no, not the phone, the doorbell will probably ring. We got some big old waspy things trying to look around for a place to nest, I think. I don't know how this looks in daylight, but it's a rare view. For all I know, it could be a big burnout over there. In fact, it probably is, so I might be better advised to put some what's the word, balanced alternative natural lighting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of size up and make some lead that's going to go in here, and let's have a look how this seats. Actually, this is quite tidy, but it's actually created a cluster of wires that are going to be in the way. We've also got a loose jack socket here, which is a classic Les Paul problem, no SG problem. So what I might do, despite the very pretty tidiness of this, I might actually want to unclip this, because I want the space. I need the space actually in here, and I can't really afford to have that making a big solid lump of wires, tidy though it looks. So Stuart, if you'll forgive my crimes against tidiness, what this then allows me to do is just to reposition these wires to such a place. Let's just check that they're all in good nick. I want to basically get them kind of out of the way so I can put the correct amount of lead in the place. Now this is so close to touching out. That's incredible. I'm going to have to do no, I'm not going to do an adjustment. I wonder if you can see this. Let me show you. Are you running? MP4, wide angle, yeah, battery full. Okay, so we have the switch in its correct position, but can you see there is almost, in fact there's practically no room between one of the live lugs and this mostly shielded cavity here, but in fact the shielding and mixes with paint there, so that could be so close to touching out, and sometimes I've found that this finish can be slightly conductive. So I think what I want to do here is I want to bend this out or turn this round, one of the two, probably bend it out or in, but put a piece of Gorilla Tape in there just to stop any chance of that touching out. And then I want to tighten this up, and I want to kind of tidy these a bit out of the way. And there's technically there's plenty of room, and we do need to use the room here for this lead insert business. So again, sort of being as careful as possible. I'll take you back onto the. Actually, I can put you here. Doink. You can have a little bit of a wonder. There you have it. Something like that. So yeah, I'm going to prod and poke a few wires out of the way, because we just need the space. So this one is pulling a bit because it's attached. I mean, where does it go? It goes over there, but it's sort of interlocked. So let's put that round this pot here, and then let's put those around the side of that one there. I just really want to push them down below the level of the pots. That's my main interest, so that I've got the majority of the space free here to attach the ballast. And I can just turn this over, press those down, and that's same. It's not perfect, but it's kind of safely out of the way. I say. Now, one of the things I can do here is, while I've got the thing off, is I'm just going to put a little bit of tape over the top of these. Now, you might wonder why exactly. It's because while I'm at it, it will keep the wires partly in place. Oh, hang on, I need to do my bit of spraying first. It'll keep the wires in place, but it'll also prevent any accidental grounding out. Now, I don't think lead is terribly conductive, but I could be wrong. Also, there's a load of people get quite uptight about the so-called magnetic properties of lead, and won't that interfere with your pickups? And apparently not, if you do a lot of research into it. Now, I've got some contact cleaner here, and I want to give these things a sort of a squirt, but what I want to do is I want to make sure that this doesn't come out, if at all possible. I don't want it coming out onto the paintwork. So if it comes out, I'd like it to come out directly onto the floor, and if there is any spill, I want to pull it off like that and just catch it before it goes anywhere else. Now, with this contact cleaner, doesn't, in my experience, doesn't do anything bad to poly finishes, but it can and will knacker up old, what's that stuff called, you know, nitro. Funny enough, mostly when pots are scratchy, it's because they aren't used enough. And actually the best way to clean a pot is to use it a lot. It's the, if you think about the surfaces of the variable resistory thing, is that the right word? Anyway, I don't really mind. But that thing inside that the metal contacts touch against as it goes round, you know what I mean. It is a variable resistor, isn't it? Anyway, that thing just gets caked in slightly old goo, and you need to use it or lose it. And by using it, you keep it clean and make sure there's two metal surfaces touching two metal surfaces. So don't worry about the look of this thing, the tape. It's just as a sort of a last you know, shieldy protection thing. You can pull it all off and throw it away and it won't hurt anybody. But I'm just doing that so that we have a clear run at putting the lead in place. And what I also want to do is just get this important bit, is to get this little piece of the that thing switch out of the way. Now, one of the ways I can do it is by bending it inwards, actually, which brings it a little closer to the center output position, which in a sense is a bit of a dodgy thing to do, but there's a bit of movement on here. It needs tightening anyway, so I'll do two things. I'll just move that in there, snip off, if I can, the excess, a little bit of hangover metal which I actually can't get in there to do. So let's see if I can turn it far enough to get in there. Tidies that up a bit. We do need it square because we want the switch to operate vertically, ideally, although sometimes I prefer them going backwards and forwards, but that's my preference. And what I'm going to do is, while it's turned off slightly to one side, I'm going to go in here and place a little bit of tape in against the paintwork like that, and just keep it as low as I can. And then when we bring this back round, that's in the way of that. Okay, so I need to get my little tightening tool and keep this in a nice position, and then we'll use this to tighten up. But we have to be wary that it's going to try and turn, get the right way around. It's going to want to which it's trying to do as I tighten it. Sorry, not a very good view. Okay, it's not perfectly vertical, horizontal, but it's close. Well, it physically looks close, but right, I'll just move that, make sure there's a gap, which there physically is. Keep it away from the wall, which is a slightly dodgy thing. About the only other way around this is to hold this with some pliers and tighten this up, but I think that's probably enough. And we also have to get this thing done up before we do anything else. The jack socket. And again, that's a matter of positioning it where it's the wires are less likely to be stressed. So I turn it around a bit more from where it was, basically. And then I will hold it with tissue or something to protect my fingers from cutting. And then tighten it up. This is something you want to do fairly regularly. It's something you, short of fixing it permanently down with some thread lock, which actually can make it really difficult to ever replace it if you need to. You basically need to check that every year or so and make sure it's tightened up. But it's easy to do with an adjustable span, as you can see. Right now, I want a bit of see-through stuff. So I've done this a couple of times in this last week, but what I'm just going to do here is, for my own sake, I'm going to just badly trace the outline of the cover, and I'm going to just identify where we've got room to put extra weight. Actually, if we're technically being, we get the most we can get in, that's the shape we can do. And since I have a pile of lead ready to be cut, I can choose that shape. So then we flip it over and we go, look, there's our actual shape, or our control plate, and that's where it's got to stick to. So I can either cut that out, or for example I can get a pencil and trace, or make a mark on the shiny stuff, which is the shielding, and I can sort of hold it down. I probably actually just press through here. Should make an impression. So yeah, roughly. Actually, I can't see. Let's draw it on in the light. Okay, something like that, along there like that. It comes down here like this to something that goes like this. Something that goes like that. Okay. Not exact, but it's the quickest way of doing it. That's not bad. Right, so basically my plan is to, in fact actually I should have cut this out, silly me. Let's cut it out and I'll just double check the shape. But it's just easier to do this. I was trying to not destroy a piece of cellophane, clear, see-through. So this extra little curly bit here allows some extra lead to go into the corner. Right. So we can chuck it on there like that and then go, roughly speaking, there's the extent of our template. I'll just go around it one more time. Okay, bit far that time. And are we going to the outside of that or the inside of that? So the outside. So to the outside of that. Okay. So now, now the fun is we get the lead. Now I think I remember working with 5, excuse me, 5 pieces of this lead. So what I need to do is I basically need to print on here 5 or 6 of these, and just sort of do it with the least amount of wastage as possible. But any scrap can become ballast for use in other ways and other times. So little sort of shards and offcuts are can be minced up into small pieces and crammed into other cavities. As you can see, it's not easy to draw around a piece of cellophane. Cellophane, you know what I mean. Acetate, it's probably not even the right word. Clear, see-through stuff. So it's just a number of these, you know, with as little extra trimming required as possible. So a bit of that's that, and so on and so forth. And then what I do with these sheets is I will use some, oh crap, some 3M carpet, permanent carpet, double-sided carpet tape, which is pretty good stuff so far. I've used it for templates, very handy for making templates, sticking templates I should say. And then that tape will hold these together, and actually it will hold them to the electrics cover plate. Now of course it may not stick forever, and you may find that they come loose at some point, but if they do, they'll be snug because they'll be resting on top of the pots. Anyway, the idea is I'll get as much in there as snugly fits. That's the plan, Stan. Now I'm ahead of this. I wasn't going to do this guitar until Friday or such. I'm ahead of this because of the delay in the pickup and so on. So it's all a bit, and we've got voting to do today, and we've got visits and shopping trips and bits and bobs. And the biggest thing I've got coming up is getting this pickup and wiring up Mark's custom, and it's a relatively complicated wiring system. These tin snippy things, by the way, are just invaluable. They cut absolutely everything from tin to copper to lead like this. And I mean, they're not easy to use exactly. You struggle to get in and out of the shapes because they're such big toothy things, but if you're careful you can sort of just about use them. There are some king-size hornets moseying around this place looking for a place to make a new home. So 6 of these is about half a kilo roughly. So there we go, look, cutting out to shape. I mean, obviously they're not going to be perfect, they'll be slightly different to each other, but they will pretty much follow the same basic shape pattern, so we won't have radically different bits sticking out. But it's not about aligning them up with some sort of, you know, computer controlled precision. This is as good as we can get with a handheld snippers and some roofing lead, which that little extra bit of curviness is a pain, although I kind of think it's worth it to get that extra bit of lead in the game. Now what I'll do is, once I've cut these out, is I'll put them all together in the vise and squash them flat as possible, before putting some double-sided sticky tape on the back of each of them, or top of each, whichever way. One side that matches up, and then stick them all together, and then apply them to the inside of the thing. It makes the electrics cavity a little bit harder to lift off. Obviously, the owner of the guitar has to know that it's got a ton of weight on the inside, because it won't just, you take the screws off and it won't just instantly lift up with a fingernail, because you've got a load of weight on it. But it does work as long as you know it's there. And basically this half a kilo is about as much as you're going to get comfortably into a guitar like this. There isn't really any more available space to do it on an SG. Beyond that, you have to look at drilling special, you know, if you really wanted to add more weight, lead, you'd have to drill holes and pack them with sheets of lead or whatever, and then disguise them. I mean, one of the things I've often thought about actually on some really lightweight guitars is adding some coach bolts and things like that, just as a stylistic thing. You know, you can have, it could look quite sort of steampunk whilst adding a bit of weight to the whole thing. Basically swapping wood for cast, you know, iron or steel or whatever. That's one way of increasing the weight, but again, it's quite a radical modification style-wise. So this is the subtle approach, I promise you. So like I say, it's difficult to cut this shape very prettily. Your grandmother wouldn't be impressed by the cutting out going on here, but as you can see, it's pretty simple, and you can tell weight-wise, it's probably not a lot of other ways of getting half a kilo of extra weight into a SG-shaped guitar other than something like this. What's in here? Come on, Waspy. I don't mind. I've got nothing against wasps. I can't believe that years ago I used to kill them. I couldn't do it now. Couldn't do it. Something happens when you get older and hopefully wiser. I think more in tune with life and the planet and the universe you live in. Something happens and you don't want to kill anything. I can't do fishing, anything like that anymore. Just wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to put any living thing through that. I know you're going to say, next stop veganism. Maybe. I actually don't like the taste and quality of most meat products anyway, personally. I have a reputation as a fussy eater, but yeah, just living things are amazing in their own way, and I can't kill things and destroy life with impunity anymore. You know, in a way that I did when I was probably less aware of it, or less bothered by it, or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, I'm not trying to claim kind of Buddhist enlightenment, just it doesn't work for me to kill things. I don't like it. So I don't even try and kill wasps or bees or any stingy things or flies or 10-legged things or 12-horned things that come into the shed. It's all titled to be living as far as I'm concerned. And I try, unless I'm under direct attack from a hammerhead shark or something, or a great white, I try to live and let live. So here's my, you can see I've been doing quite a bit, here's my scraps, but you know, chop them up. One day I'll have a completely nerdy couple of hours just cutting these into tiny little snips. There's probably a mincing machine you can buy to mince up lead. In fact, it'd probably even just be fun to get a little cauldron-y thing and put it on a fire and melt it down. That would be fun. Right, so this is quite an expensive process in a way, because for each one of these things let's see, what can I do? I want them to stick, but I don't want to get too fiddly with this, but I do want those little cornery bits to stick, but I think that's a bit too finicky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut each one of these its own little pad of stick, and I'm cutting so it doesn't overlap mostly. This is that double-sided duck tape. Is it duck? Yeah, duck something brand, made to hold carpets down basically. It does a very nice job on templates, holding a template well enough and long enough for you to do a route. You can be amazed how some of these double-sided tapes really don't they don't hold well enough, and they can actually move while you're routing, which is an absolute disaster. So £7.95 for a roll of this is actually, in my books, money well spent, worth spending. Right, okay, so let's just get my head around this. Which way up is this actually going to go in the scheme of things? That's the thing, that goes to there, goes around there. Am I fitting in? Yes, I'm fitting in. Okay, so that's the down side. This is all facing down, so it's going to go, that's the start one on the bottom. Okay, so we go that one to there. Take that off just for, I don't know, aesthetics' sake. Pull that off. Place that on there. Line it up as close as you can. Same. I was sitting outside drinking coffee this morning, watching a brand new brood of tiny little golden coloured spiders emerging from, I don't know, whatever they emerge from. They seem to all come out in a single kind of massive cluster, and they were sort of, the parent has laid all these fine webs for them to effectively escape on, so they come out of this egg ball type of nesty thing, and then they just all stay there. And it seemed to me like these tiny little golden things were soaking up sunlight to get enough energy to make a break for it. And then I saw the first one of this crew, this clutch, suddenly make a run up this thin little strand, and I guess, compared to in miniature spider dimensions, while everyone else was just sat there soaking the sun up, this one who'd reached the right, I don't know, adventure or the right point of ambition or temperature or whatever it takes, sort of scarpered up this long thin wire to its new life, I guess, and all the others just sort of stayed there heating up and doing whatever they were doing. But the distance it must have travelled while all the others were staying dead still was incredible. It was an equivalent to a sort of half-mile run. Amazing. Now you might say to me, Larry, why don't you keep hold of, what the hell was that from? And people say to me, Larry, you might want to keep that because you're going to use that again for your bog standard SG. Oh, you're not, sir. And you might say, you're right, I am. And I might say to you, hellfire, I've put this all in the wrong way. It's upside down still. What am I doing? So I could say to you, Larry, you've got it upside down and wasted a piece of that gosh darn tape. That's okay, I say to you. I'm going to put it this time on the back side, like so. Actually, for this bit, I might go the extra whole hog leg and cut me a, well, badly cut me a shape. Very badly. Yeah, a bit messy. This stuff is very sticky and very kind of rubbery, but it's good, I tell you, it's good. Right, so here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Cut that, keep that for some other time. Put that away, throw that away, put those away for another day. Now we may have actually put too much on here. It may not close, so we may have to remove one layer. I hope we don't, because the aim of the game was to get as many in as possible before we do anything else. Come on, in you go. Guess what? It's sitting too close to that edge. Gosh darn it, what have I done? Come on now. Gently remove. Silly me, how did that happen? Let me get my, I think I've put that slightly too close to the edge. I'm going to do that again. Let me just check this first before I do it. Yeah, there's room, but I need to be closer to the bottom edge, not the top edge. That'll learn me. That'll learn me too. I'm not going to bother with that now, it's tired me out. I'm just going to slap it on like that and snip off that bit there. So this is the slightly difficult bit to guess, so you have to be lucky. So I'm going to drop it down a fraction there to make sure it fits. Before I do too much. There you have it. Look at that. Ta-da! Perfect. So I'm going to get a bit of tape, stick my SG template on the board somewhere neatly out of the way with some other templates. Get that out of the way. Tidy that up a bit. Push that out of the way. Do this, do that, move that. Put that away. So we are done in the extra weight department. And of course I can drop that off like that. If I wish to, stay, you can just squeeze that down, but everything will work nicely, and it's just probably might even be short shy of the top. And if we really wanted to, we could find some foam. Where's the foam? Long gone. Okay. I thought I had some simple foam, pickup foam, but I think I must have binned it. But yeah, you could even put some foam in there to support it, but I think this is pretty snug actually. So there we have it. And I'm going to actually do this back up while we're here, because that's all nice. And what I'll do is just test it quickly to make sure that it's all good. But I'd say half a kilo, nearly half a kilo of extra weight fitted in. If it did come loose under there, which it can do because it's it's only taped, if it comes loose, then good quality double-sided tape will do. Wow, that's added a bit of heft to this thing. Make sure the pickups work properly. moving either, which is good. Right. Oh, that's nice. Then have I got a strap in here to test it on? Well, not one of the usual shiny ones, I have to say. I've got a sort of very dusty, leathery thing. Just have a feel of how it sits. It's probably as good a test as any. I've got the strap button in the conventional position. God, it still wants to tip. Isn't that amazing how badly out of whack these things are? Look at that, an extra ½ kilo. This is a shiny shirt, by the way, but you know, an extra ½ kilo of weight. Look, really. Sort of just about sits there with the arm. There was a, oh God, who made it? Was it Shala? Somebody, there was a name, it had a brand name called a, anyway, I've forgotten it, but it was very clever. It was a strap weight, and basically you had a pouch on that extended below, off the end of here. So this was extended, and there was a kind of weight with ballast in it, and it kept your guitar weighted at this end, which is a kind of good idea. Only problem is I've done it before myself. I made one, and you end up with a weight dangling around, and then you can stop it by kind of velcroing it to there, and it just becomes a bit of an encumbrance. But I just wish Gibson and them would make this thing balanced from the outset. It's dopey. Anyway, that's the best we can do. That weight plus a combination of in combination with a slightly grippier strap is the only way around it, I'm afraid. I'm just going to put you back on the post. Next step, just get straight on into things. Next step will be setup. Now, Stuart's got 11 to 48 strings going on here, which is a monster. But every time I play a guitar with 11/48, I suddenly like them. But you do need hands of iron. Okay, so we are going to go to a nice low action eventually, and what I'm going to do, because we aren't at a nice low action to begin with, I am just going to fake it with a capo on it, and now I'm going to lower it a bit to where I would want it. I checked with Stuart about this action thing. You know, some people don't want a low action. When somebody brings a guitar out and says, can you do a setup, I check and say, do you want a low action? Because the SG is very good at doing a very low action, but if you don't want it, we will not aim for it. Now, this is a very low action, which is a little bit artificially low, simply because we have a capo on, and the actual nut action won't be that low when the time has come. So here we're starting off a bit above 1.5 and then about 1.2, and it will go down to 1.5 and 1.2 when the first fret action is correctly set. Now I'm just going to retune it since we've moved the things. Both those high E and the B string are pinging a bit there, so they're obviously not that happy with that nut. Will be causing tuning issues. So first thing to note then is we'll leave the first fret action where it is for the process of fret leveling, because it's not critical to that. We've chosen a last fret action. Okay, and just want to check the neck relief is minimal. In fact, I'm probably going to find that there's none on this top edge. Oh, there is a little bit. It's very flat, which is fine. If we were to capo it and see what it sounded like as if we'd set the really low first fret action, God, those 11s are good. Okay, so at the chosen low action with a low first fret action, there's just a bit of zinging going out. So the frets aren't bad at all, comparatively speaking, but it's in for the full whack. So I'm going to do a fret leveling on it to just eke out those bends so that they're not zing out at that point. And then once that's done, hopefully tomorrow in the post, the new nut will arrive and we'll fit that, and I'll just clean this up with a little bit of scratch remover, see what's cleanable. It's pretty good condition. There are 1 or 2 scratches that are permanent, and a couple of knocks on the side, but other than that, it's in fairly good nick. So the thing to do at this point, remembering, so we've got a low action, we've got a flat neck profile as well, because SGs like to be like that. They're very responsive necks and you can get a really low action. Now, Stuart is not a shredder, but you don't have to be a shredder to appreciate a low action, providing it plays well. And I think the combination of these heavy strings, these relatively heavy strings, and the inherent goodness of the SG neck is a winner. See, that's gripping, so these strings are not very well matched for this gauge. Sorry, this nut is not very well matched for this gauge of strings, but it's not going to be a problem because once we change that out with the adjustable Tusq nut, that is actually the idea about that. The purpose of that is we don't have to dig down to get the right action. We can use the adjustability to bring the action up, and it also means that we use the sort of factory grooves instead of having to cut any more, which are always by definition slightly ragged. It's kind of microscopically impossible, even with expensive Japanese nut files, to make a perfectly smooth and non-wiggly slot. So wherever possible, factory is best, but most of the time with factory you can't, as I said, you can't get that precise action that we're after. So it's it used to be for me always a matter of spending a lot of time cutting down the slots until I discovered those inserts which allow me to get the best of both worlds. I always keep my forearm out of the way in case these high strings break when I tune up like that. You get a whip from here on here if they break. Close enough. Right, so we've got the neck back under its normal load, and all I'm going to do now is I'm going to level it with my tunable thing. Had a comment on a YouTube video today from somebody who kind of was doing a sort of gotcha thing, that constructive kind of comments you can get. And a person had obviously spotted me doing a fret leveling, and at some point in the fret leveling he'd seen me stop leveling and minutely increase the playing, or the saddle action, and his comment was something like, "Hey, go through all of that only to, you know, give up and raise the action," or some. I think that's what he was referring to. It was quite difficult to know. I mentioned in my comment back to him that I wasn't going to go and watch my entire video, having done 700 of them, and it's no interest to go and watch a video to find out what he was critiquing. Anyhow, if my assumption was correct, and he was critiquing the fact that after a certain amount of leveling, I then gave up and raised the action instead of chased the level with the banana, as I call it. Then the thing I pointed out to him is that very often, he said, you know, why I don't know why you stop trying to be clever and just do it the way it's been done for hundreds of years, that sort of comment. And I pointed out to him that I could do it the way it's been done before, you know, just scrape off enough material just to get everything down to the same level, in which case everything would be fine. But it's the low frets that dictate the effective relative levelness of your frets. And my game is to, when you come across a fretboard, and it's always the low frets that create the problem. The high frets, the tools take them off quite easily. The low frets are the ones that you're forced with the choices and the conundrum, because when you have a low fret, yes, it makes the subsequent or the preceding fret effectively high. What am I doing? I'm doing the next string. Yeah, it makes the next fret effectively high, but you have to take all of the frets around the whole fingerboard down until you've bottomed out effectively the low fret. And that's why there's a judgment call involved, because, and you know, he's quite right, I could get one of those wonderful old-fashioned files that I used to use and use the old neck off technique, and I get the old, and I'm no knocking this, I get the old crimson file, right, I used to use, and go down there like that with sound effects. And guess what? I'd end up with everything completely level. I'd scrape away all the, you know, the differences between the actual high ones and the actual low ones, and until I bottomed it all out and it was one beautiful level. But I don't do that because the cost of fret metal is too high. And so what I did, and he saw me do, was I get as far as I judge to be worthwhile in balancing these things out, minimizing the difference between the low fret and the surrounding higher frets. And then when I judge that to continue do with whatever tool I've got, including this, my more delicate one, when I judge that to be too costly in fret metal, guess what I'll do? I'll make a microscopic increase down there, because a tiny increase down here feels minuscule, hardly even noticeable to the player, but it saves relatively a lot of fret metal. So what he was critiquing was one of the many kind of judgment calls along the way, and I was kind of interested in the sort of, I'm always interested in the negative critiques, because they're usually obsessed with being right about something, and to be quite honest, I try very hard myself to check my need to be right. You know, like everyone, every human being, I have suffered from that, and more and more these days I can recognise when I have a strong need to be right. It's an unpleasant characteristic, and it makes us all into asses. But it's also when you recognise it in yourself, you tend to be able to recognise it in others too. And that's what I think. You know, he accused me of needing to be right by using this method, or better than other methods. And when I talk about this method, and I say I do this because this reason, that reason, and the other reason, I find it an improvement on the conventional method. That's what I'm reporting. I'm reporting my experience, is that I find it an improvement. But when somebody gets all hot and flustered about being right, I check back with my need to be right, but I also recognise in them they kind of a need to prove somebody wrong in their comment. And it's such a ugly contribution. See? No zings. Now what we've got, I don't know if you can see, maybe you can't, but I'll tell you, there are a couple of low frets here, particularly that one, and that would have made the next one relatively high, but we've taken down, we've evened it out, and for the amount of, for the height of the action chosen, that's enough leveling, even though I'm leaving an actual difference between this low fret here, which is not being cut at all, and another one here. They're not being cut at all, whilst others are. I'm leaving the remaining difference, which accounts for there still being an undisturbed black pen, and yet I'm leaving that because for the amount of action chosen, that tiny remaining discrepancy between absolute flatness is irrelevant. It doesn't come into play because of the relative height of the action. If you wanted to go lower again, you would have to continue evening it out if you wanted to. But you see, I leave the difference because it's this method, and this is why I like to do it this way, is only about leveling until the chosen action plays. And I think this character also missed that because the conventional methods don't have any reference point. You see, when I say this levels until it plays, how am I able to say that? Well, because the strings are on and I can level until it plays at the chosen action. Aha! You see why that's a good method? I think that bugs me, and you've probably heard me go on about this before. I think it does bug me, is when people, and it only bugs me because I've done it myself, when we, in our ignorance and our inexperience and our egocentricness, we dive onto something and pronounce somebody else wrong. And in seeing it through only our own perspective, we have no concept that the reason a person might do something is because, it's because they've considered it and thought out and tested and experimented and come to a lived, actual evidence-based conclusion based on real experience. And that bit is what, and annoys isn't the right word, it kind of flabbergasts me even still. And yet I understand it because we've all been like that. Mostly when we were arrogant teenagers and thought we knew everything about how to fix the world. But it is funny that, I keep seeing this sort of blindness that somebody who comes on to tell you you're wrong on social media, and says you shouldn't use that method, you should go back to what they've been doing for hundreds of years. And you think, why would you assume for 1 minute that in 700 plus, or probably more, 1,000 setups, why would you think that I haven't chosen to do this based on a massive pile of evidence? Not just evidence that I read on a forum, but evidence that I've seen and felt with my own fingertips and heard with my own ears. Why would you even begin to think my decisions weren't based on all of that, a weight of evidence, first-hand evidence? And I bet you, the person critiquing me, I will bet you any amount of money, they haven't done 1,000 setups and evaluated as they went exactly how it worked and why they're doing it the way they do it. But that's the arrogance of it, the egotistic arrogance. We think that we're in a perfectly qualified position to make a judgment on somebody else's technique, evidence-based technique, And I just, that boggles me every time. And sometimes when I'm feeling magnanimous, I take the time to kind of gently, with as much humour as I can muster, suggest that those people's existence might be improved by practicing or experimenting with coming from the perspective that when somebody does something this way, or a way, it might be because they thought about it long and hard and have good evidential reasons for doing it. And people who watch these videos...
It's just self-therapy.
No, not yet. People who watch these videos will know, will be bored with that little discussion because I've been through it quite a lot of times. But it just, you'll see it playing out all the time, and it creates the most negative reactions from the people being critiqued, and it fuels the people giving the critique, the arrogant critique, and it just goes on, and the world edges towards being a worse place thanks to that criticism. It's just arrogance, really. So there you go. There is.
Hornet's still around.
Yeah, the hornet's still around. I'm going to stop now, go and get a cup of tea. Still no pickup arrived. Fret levelled, ready to be reprofiled. And again, I can see two or three frets here where the surface, 4 frets in fact, where it hasn't even touched them, right? And they are relatively still low compared to the others. But the effect of their lowness is below the set action, and that's the great advantage of this method, because there's no other method you could ascertain that. You could do it with the other method with this thing, and then you could put all the strings back on and go, nah, still not, you know, and then you could keep leveling it, nah, no, still. Here, you can stop as soon as it reaches playability. Anyway, that's why I do it, Mr. Critics. And we're back again. Time to, what do you call it? Reprofile the frets. It's gone from being sultry and warm to a bit cooler. And still no sign of the pickup. Anyway, so this set of 11s, 11 to 48s is coming off, and I will put it back on once I've done the polishing, because I want it on to fit the new nut when it arrives tomorrow. But in the meantime, I'll get them out of the way for the reprofiling of these frets and for the polishing out. God, they're big chunky cables, these. I should switch to 11s, it'd be good for my hand strength or something. Teach myself to play them. There's transatlantic cable city here. Deadly as well. Let's pull these off to one side. Oh, I left the bleeding amp on again. Ugh. Right, so what we do with these is there's a little hole in the fingerboard here. It doesn't affect anything, it's purely cosmetic, but we paint these over again, and then we run over the top with the Stuart fret reprofiling, what do they call it, fret crowning file. And the ones that have been cut or levelled will then get reshaped to a nice arch shape, which is what it should be. But currently they're a little bit flattened off, so these are medium jumbos, so that's what I'm going to use. And actually very little material taken off, so very little reprofiling will be needed. A little bit more on some frets than others. And of course the ones that haven't been touched at all, the low ones, won't need any. You know, just whiz across those and move on to the next one. Very, very light levelling here. You can see how quickly I'm going through these. There's hardly any reprofiling work needs doing, which is good. But having said that, we could still hear the improvement that it made by the fact that the notes, the bends that were slightly zizzing before, now play cleanly, which is the purpose of doing this light, delicate amount of fret levelling. Brush off some of the dust. And now I'm going to, is this my new, no, yes, no, let's get the new stuff out, which is low tack finally, my guy Paul in the market finally got his supplies in years late. So we're back to proper low tack. So I'm going to mask off all of these frets for now, and then obviously I'll cut a whole set of smaller strips in order to mask off the closer together frets, if you get the meaning. And then I'm going to polish these out with a series of different paper grades from 600 grit up to 1500, and then I switched to a set of micro mesh papers, which I know Stuart's already used on these frets when he first got the guitar, which are great for polishing, really good polishing stuff. But this is the series I'm going to use here is to obviously remove the scratching that I've put on by first of all leveling the frets, and then also by reprofiling them. And so the leveling paper I use is 400 grit, and the recrowning file, the reprofiling or the crowning file I use is actually 300 grit. So we're going to go from 300 grit style flavoured scratches to 600 grit paper. So that's the first kind of that's the first bit of work the paper has to do. It has to take those 300 grit scratches down to 600 grit flavoured scratches, and then from there onwards we'll take the 600 to 1000, and then the 1000 to 15, and then I'll use a series of micro mesh papers after that. So I could either keep the should I keep the camera running? I sometimes most of the time I don't, because I find it a boring process. And I assume everybody else will, but then sometimes people say, "Oh, you show the fret polishing." So maybe I'll just keep. Maybe it's actually easier to keep it as one video and keep it running. And then invariably I'll get somebody who will make a comment saying, "I came to find out key nuggets of information on setting up my Epiphone SG, and all I got was 25 minutes of sanding frets or cutting bits of paper or scraping paper off a board," or so you can't win. Actually, you can win. You can win by doing what suits you, which is what I do always. So that's a temporary sanding board from yesterday. Right, so this is my paper cutting department, and I'm just going to get my 4 lengths of paper and then divide those up into narrower and narrower strips, and see, get the whole thing covered up. Tonight we're going to go meeting up with our Tavistock band, name of DEFCON 1. We're struggling to keep things going at the moment. We've actually got some gigs booked, and the usual gigs booked thing going on, but we're in a sort of change thing, in that we've just gone over to our one-time bass player moving on to lead guitar, and now we're supposed to be meeting and auditioning a bass player, but that coincides with losing our rehearsal space, so we're not anywhere to rehearse, and we've tried a few alternatives, but they're booked up until a certain point, blah blah blah. Anyway, so the idea is we're going to meet up tonight to say hello to this bass player, which I don't know if that's a very useful thing to do, particularly for me, since I think as a band we need to should have been discussing our last gig, which I think was pretty terrible, and some serious decision making around that. So I've kind of yet to, it's the old classic band thing, you know, I've yet to raise that issue, including the other guitarist's sound that his guitar was producing, which was awful. So there's a few things to touch on, none of which will be appropriate for doing whilst auditioning or saying hello to a new bass player. So it's all of that band stuff, that wonderful band stuff. I've got a feeling that if it doesn't work out, then I think I'll be going back to square one and looking for some people to play with, but people, I think perhaps starting from a position of trying to identify maybe more suited people, more suited to the kind of thing I want to do, which is, for any of you played in bands, you know that's the hardest thing of all, because you kind of find yourself lurching around from bunch of people to bunch of people who, you know, happen to need a guitar player or are friends of friends, and it's all convenient or whatever, and it's the kind of chance of finding musical compatibles or soulmates, if you like, or whatever you might call it, is actually quite slim, isn't it, really? Or quite difficult, you know. And then you invest time in you know, learning to play together a bit, and you know, it's like any relationship. If you don't deal with certain things when they come up, if you not communication isn't so great, then the thing can go wrong, because as much because of that as because of anything that you can't do musically. Actually, I think we were just about getting to a fairly tight position when our guitarist sort of moved off to, our lead guitarist moved up to focus on his acoustic covers band, and that's, you know, that's real life, and it's absolutely fine. And my feeling is we should have carried on as a 4-piece and worked to fill that extra gap, the sound gap. I actually celebrated the gap because it actually created some space. That's my feeling, and in fact I think it created some space that the few times we played as a 4-piece. Actually, I think it worked quite well, and the audience clearly did as well, and so it made some space that I think as a band we musically definitely needed and didn't have when there were 2 guitarists. So so my feeling was that was actually quite a positive thing in some ways, although we lost, you know, some really cool lead guitar stuff that we did when James was doing lead guitar. Anyway, and my choice would have been to stick with the 4-piece format and work on, you know, getting that to play better, tighter and better. But what the guys did was they kind of, I think our bass player was really keen to, well, he's a guitar player first and foremost, so I think he kind of jumped at the chance to take over the guitar duties, and like I say, I'm not sure, for me that wasn't the right move, I think. So it's a difficult one, you know, how do you communicate that without annoying people? But you know, if you hold the view for good reason, you need to be able to say it. But when it's tied up with somebody wanting to play, you know, not frustrated isn't quite the right word, but you know what I mean. Somebody who's really thrilled to be able to take up the guitar playing bit, and then of course the question is you have to then sort of explain your rationale for why you don't think that works, and that, you know, there's some, by definition, there's some criticism implied in it, you know, along with some musical, you know, solid good reasons, I think, musically. But you know, it's very, very difficult to say. I think we were a better unit when you were playing bass and we only had one guitar player, me, who wasn't a fantastic lead guitarist at all. Not, you know, not fantastic at anything, but anyway. So anyway, that's an interesting position to be in. Question is, can we be good? Can we be a good band in the format we're currently in? At the moment, with our former bassist on lead guitar, with some problems around that, and with having a not great combination of guitars now, guitar heavy, and with a brand new unknown bass player coming in the mix, we're now back to almost square zero really. I don't think the format works, and who knows whether a new bass player will add to the thing or not. So we've gone from being what I think was we were a fairly confident four-piece who could, I think, discharge the gigs that we've currently got booked, to being actually out of the running now. We're not even in a position to play confidently. If we had to play one in 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time, I don't think we're in the position to do it, because we simply don't know whether we've got a bass player or not. Whereas we had one before we had two guitar players. Anyhow, you get what I'm getting at. What I'm going to do is, while I'm here, I'm going to do a little bit of additional cleaning, because I like to, and I can, and it's kind of ready to go. Technically, at this point in time, I don't need this nut on anymore, so I'm going to take this off. Obviously, I can't put the strings back on until we've got the next nut in place. In fact, I could actually do this now, because I could go and steal the adjustable nut off any one of my guitars. In fact, I might just do that, and I'll replace that. Then when in fact, I will do that. That's dopey, isn't it? Let's do that the proper way. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to get into a mixture of fret polishing and headstock all over cleaning, so I can do the bulk of the kind of cleaning up stuff in one go. And this is quite, I keep catching things on there. Lucky it's not sharp, but it is metal, so it's not a good idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to undo these tuners, and then it gives me a clear run at cleaning up the headstock, and it's just a little thing I like to do whenever I can, if it's appropriate. If we've got a shiny guitar, if it's a Rode one, you know, much loved, somebody's played it guitar, then I don't. But if it's a sort of clearly a shiny guitar, then it's a little sort of 10-minute detour to give the guitar headstock a real nice clean up, which, you know, makes the whole thing sort of jump out really a little bit. And so it's just a part of what I like to do. Yeah, it's a funny one, that whole band thing. You know, there are only so many bands and so many groups of people in your area, and you know, everybody's trying to do the same thing, as in find people that they get on with and can communicate, musically relate to. And it's like any relationship. It takes a lot of investment and time and willingness to, you know, work hard, to compromise and stuff, and to, most importantly, just like any relationship, to communicate. That's the bit that in too many of the bands, including this one, I guess, there's too little. I don't want to sound all John Anderson and airy fairy, sorry, but you know, it's too little honest communication, because just that's difficult in life generally. You know, we tend to shy away from it. So, but I think it's a marker of how good you're going to be. You know, along with your musical ability or your sensibility. If you can't openly discuss and improve things in the relationship, then, you know, like any relationship, it isn't going to work out very well. So it's just like life, you know. And none of us are by default brilliantly good at it. You know, it always takes effort and can be really challenging. I got a little bit of polisher stuff, kind of expensive stuff, but it's wow, it's trying to escape because of the heat, I think. So while the tuners are off, I can just go around the headstock in a way that you can't do with the tuners aboard, and you get this really nice quick clean up that will just look and feel wonderful compared to kind of working your way around those tuners in place. So for example, swing, gorgeous, look at that, almost as good as new, lovely. And then we can do the back of the headstock as well while we're at it. Oh, the bridge has come off, but that's fine because they do. This is escaping. Yeah, so you know, I suppose like I've learned over the years is, you know, bands are like any relationship. You know, they're only as good as the quality of the communication you fight for. You know, meaning that it doesn't come easy to any of us, like as it often doesn't in relationships. But you've got to be willing to try and communicate if you want it to be better than it is. So that's what tonight's about, going down and finding a way to say, well, need to find a way to say, look, I'm not sure this is working in this format. However, the problem with that is it's just not the right place to be doing that, given that you know, there's this new bass player. We're sort of saying hello to the new bass player. So my concern is when we're going to, if and when we're ever going to get into that space to have that conversation. So anyway, back to this. I'm just getting in and out amongst between the posts, the bridge and the stop bar to give it a bit of a clean. And again, it's a nice little touch, can make things look very nice and shiny. Doesn't take a lot of this stuff because there's not a lot of dirt and filth on this guitar, and it lifts it up very effectively. You can get a lot done. Probably just as well to do it when all of the tape is off and everything's done, because you can really get a good run at everything. But it's it's nice to get in between the bits that don't normally don't normally get cleaned, but B usually are the places where the dust and the grime accumulates and sort of look older and tired first of all. It's a pretty good neck all around there, this guitar. So, and the beauty of having done the setup the way that I did it earlier on is that I can take all of these components off as much as I like, and I don't have to worry about where the action was set or anything like that, because it'll go right back to the playing action I want when I reload it with strings. And even if I've moved the action of the bridge and changed everything, I can just basically dial it back to where I know I want it, which is about 1.5 to 1.2 or even a little bit lower, and it will play because it's been leveled at that setting. And providing generally I'm using the same gauge of strings, I also then can be confident that the neck relief will also return to the same, pretty much the same place or configuration or shape that it was when I was leveling. You know, because you can pretty much rely on it to do that. It's just a piece of wood, and it will respond the same way. So here we have our frets ready to be polished, and I'm going to pull me up a piece of 600, a piece of 1000 and a piece of 1500. I'm going to tear them in 3 bits and everything. Save that for the next setup. Stick it under a magnet somewhere. There you go. Magnets, can't live without them. Almost better than Velcro. Probably better than Velcro. Okay, so there's my first 3 grades of paper. 600, 1000, 1500 in pairs, and then I've got my set of micro mesh for afterwards and the block that I'll use. And I always like to do personally like to do the first set by hand, first piece of paper by hand. I like to just feel my way around the frets and see each one as I take off the pen by hand, and kind of making sure that I get the tops of every single fret. Just a personal habit. Some people go, why are you doing that way? I like to feel this first one. I don't do all of them because I get blisters if I do, but this first one, it's a sort of, I don't know, it gives me a slow contemplative approach. I'm looking at each fret as I'm working them, making sure they all start at the same level of first sand with the 600. And that pretty much gets me to where I want to be in the first 600 piece. Lovely. Just a personal habit, a quirk of the way I prefer to do it. But you could do it with a block, you could do it with your fingers. Anyway, and then I personally move to the block, which is slightly shaped just by, I cut it that way to begin with, but it's shaped to a radius now after so much use. And then I do this, which gets noisy. Now, just a thing while I'm at this, the adjustable nut department, I don't think I've got a spare one in here. Let's just have a dig through. What I have got is I've got a base ready to go. So these are all my pre-made bases. Now of course they look ridiculous, but that will file down. I also have a couple of bone ones that I've made, but I'm not going to replace with a bone. The reason why is these do need a base ideally. I have a couple of plastic bases which I might also use, because not plastic, sorry, resin, because they're sort of cream, more of a cream colour, and they would work too. But I will take one of each of these, put them aside, and that will be my start point. Like I said, if I'm using the milliput stuff, which is a huge thing, what I've done is I've already made a shape, a pressed impression of the nut bottom that I'm going to be using, which is the standard Tusq nut bottom, which I'll go and get from one of my guitars now, so I can do this now. And it's designed, it'll either fit in this little thing, or it'll fit in this, which I will then sand back to exactly the shape, excuse me, I need to fit this guitar. And the Epiphones tend to have quite a tall nut slot, so having plenty of material to start with is probably a good idea anyway, whereas actually this may be a bit too low. So I've got one here in a sort of flexible rubbery thing, which is quite cool. I was going to use that as a mould, but anyways, it's all a bit complicated. So I will nip indoors. I thought I had a spare one, but I think I've just used that on, yes I did use that, I used it on my Antoria, but that's fine. This will do. There's a lot of filing to do obviously on on the milliput ones, but it's worth it in the end. So the reason I don't charge too much for this, I mean, there's a lot of work to get this to fit, but in a way it saves me a fair bit of cutting nut slots. So I kind of think it's a compromise to be able to just do it for the price of the Tusq insert, which is 15 quid including postage, and some time to do the custom fitting. So I usually use each piece of this grade of paper, two different spots. So the idea now is that by the time we've done these two pieces of 2 pieces of 600 grit, realistically that's taken the 300 grit last file marks down. By the way, this nut's going, well, I say in the bin, but you know what, sometimes people like a black nut, so I will keep that. It's not my favourite thing to put a plastic nut on, but you never know, there are times when a guitar just looks right. I'll probably never use it. Yes, all those scratches now are down to the 1000 grit type of level. You can, spend as much or as little time on polishing frets as you like, right to the point where you produce a mirror finish if you want. And it can be tempting to do that, but it can take a fair bit more time. One thing I haven't done is, perhaps I should. I've got a full-size buffer here which I use for gloss finishes, slow speed buffer, and I've got some wheels that are pretty much only used for the paint finish. Well, pretty much only used. I haven't bought another wheel, which I could do for this stage here with the paper on, so it's not putting stuff all over the fingerboard. But to actually buff this with the paper on, what I don't know is whether the paper would just get ripped straight off. But it might be nice to experiment with that. And as I say, I'd have to. The thing about that is that you can do it with the Dremel, but it's too hot. It runs a risk of kind of melting glue and deforming things. That's my worry. Because it spins a bit too quick. But the big buffer is actually a low speed. I think it's about 900 RPM. So it's ideal. I just need to. It'd be good if I got myself a wheel, just a wheel just for that, which I haven't actually got a spare one. To do an experiment really. I could, as long as I use the same buffing compound, I could do an experiment on this to see if I could get a mirror polish using the same material. What I don't want to do is clag the mop up completely. But having said that, it's only limited by the particles that are currently on there. And in fact, I think if I used the fine one on here, my concern is it would go probably darken. But if I use the fine one, I could probably get a mirror finish off this without putting any particles on the mop. That it would just be the same grit particles, if you know what I mean, as it's the same compound. That's what the grit comes from, the compound. So, providing I use the finishing polish, it could be worth putting this through the buffer, which is kind of. It's sitting there and I haven't used it for a while. It's better off used outside. So how about I do that just for an experiment? So I'll go through all of this. Do I need to go through all of this? What are we on? We're on 1500. Let's leave it at 1500. I wonder what this compound actually comes in at. So let's have a look. Does it have a grit? Okay, this is a, wow. A super finished P175. That's actually way grittier than the papers I've just been using. But that'd be interesting. If it produces a mirror finish on paintwork, then there's no reason why it shouldn't produce similar. It's supposed to be technically, to preserve it from any grit lifting off here, I could probably, if I could be bothered to refit all this, you know, put a whole new set of paper on there, I could probably, I could clean that off with some, providing the paper doesn't disintegrate. I think it's just, I don't want to put it on the buffer and have paper flying everywhere and getting clagged up in the mop. That's my primary concern. But let's say I stop and take off most of the grit at this point, which we should be able to do quite easily, and let it dry out so that the paper isn't soggy when we have a go at it. And maybe, just maybe, we can have a go and see what like it is. Just offer it up to the buffing wheel, but I'll leave it to dry for a bit. That's a nice new experiment. I have to get the buffer outside first and set it up, because it's quite a clunky thing. But I'll let this dry first up here. So we've done up to 1500, and if we on paper, and if we can just experiment. If a bit of a physical buffing with that paste takes it to a mirror finish, which is as smooth as I ever get, then actually I could be, you know, I could make this stage obsolete in terms of that. So meantime, I'm going to go and steal a nut off one of the other guitars temporarily. See you in a sec. So here's the adjustable nut stolen off one of my little used guitars, actually a new one, sitting on a peg, but I'm just going to check it out in one of these custom bases. I need the small screwdriver. No, this one, the hex key. Just pull the things back out of way, and then we'll place it in here. Now these are designed. These fit into the nice Tusq. There you go. That's not such a great fit. Actually, that's what I see has happened. Rather foolishly, I've done them with I've made the imprints with the hex screws backed right out, so they kind of expect to be backed out, as you know, as the way to be fitted, which isn't perfect. So this one fits in there. That's pretty good. Let's see how it sits on there. It probably fits well in there. It does fit nicely in there. It's nice and cream colour, but is it deep enough to do the job? Actually, you know what? It's pretty much spot on. That would make life simpler if it would do the job. Okay. The only thing about that one is it's slightly. We'll try. Let's put these remaining couple in here. Just trying to find the natural fit. The problem is I'm going to need to sand these down with some heavy duty grip. Well, I might as well use this since I put some clean stuff on it. Until I get this top bit down, the whole thing won't sit very well. So, first step, flatten this out. Okay, so So we drop that back in here, and now we've got some room. Fit, fit, fit. That's okay, that's okay. Really it's just a base to stand on more than anything else, so that fits in there. That's it. Okay, so you can see once that it fits in there nicely. Now what we've got to do is basically cut down the rest of this nut, and I'll probably be better off doing it on the cutter or the bandsaw over here. Even though it's a bit overkill, it's a lot quicker than finding it. Much simpler to cut this into a big block to begin with. So we have two options, a very fine small one and a big chunky one like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is just file the chunky one to a flat, flush finish. It's quite important the way the nut sits in relation to the base. It sits perpendicular, which is the right way, and the shape of the nut itself is what puts the back slope. You don't have to kind of carve any angles into this. It just needs to be nice and square all round. Getting it to flush with the front edge of the nut is a bit of a challenge. And we can eventually get there, and once we get close we can transfer to the finer grade of sandpaper. It's a nice little careful custom build process. Basically we just work this down, so then we have the kind of front edge that's now fit nicely in the nut slot, and it's dead straight in line with the edge of the nut. In fact, if anything, we could probably just go a tiny bit more, tiny bit more until it's almost taken a microscopic amount off the front of the Tusq. We want that nice and smooth. No, there you go, no lip whatsoever. It's absolutely flush. So when that's butted up against the wood of the edge of the fingerboard, that is as flush as you'll get. So now we've got the back end of it, which we want. Well, next bit actually is most important, is we want a flush square bottom, which we pretty much there already. I'll just take some off. And then the next thing we're kind of faced with is, we'll worry about the ends later and the back. We've got the front and the bottom are now square. And the next thing is to test this in the slot that exists. Now I can see straight away that that's probably, probably get my little device out. It's probably about easily 4 millimeters too big. A little bit difficult to see from here. We want to go from there to about there. So 3 millimeters too much for kickoff. So I will mark up 3 millimeters off the bottom here. Maybe, you know, generous 3 millimeters, because we're quite well within tolerance. And then I will mark, I'll find something that isn't going to chop my fingers off to mark that. I will mark parallel to the way the nut is sitting, so the way the Tusq nut is sitting. So again, sort of eyeballed parallel, but that looks good to me. So I'm going to take off this whole lot here, and again I can do a pile of that with with the sandpaper, but it's probably easier if I just bring this round to the front edge and mark along the top here and take off the bulk of it with the bandsaw, holding it down on its flat side as well. So again, if I line this up as best I can with the Tusq nut here, just have a quick look, that's a bit off, but I'll take that off with the bandsaw if I can. Easy to do, but it's quicker than scraping and leaving tons of stuff on there. So we're doing the same thing now. Back to, let's get a square edge back out of this, and we'll be approximately the right height, and just looking for a 90-degree footing really. That's the main thing. So a little bit under angled. I'm just leaning forward a tiny bit, and then switch to the finer grade. Just hope to smooth that out. So I'm now looking at a nice angle. There we go, lovely. So that's now got perhaps a little bit thicker at this base end, sort of the treble end. So I might want to just take that down a bit more by putting a bit of emphasis on the treble end, and then flatten it back out. And have a look at it. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. We'll go back to the slot and we'll check that. Now that is now sitting pretty well where I want it, but it's still I think that's a fraction, possibly a fraction tall, but the good thing about this is now the work will be done by the grub screws, so we don't have to be too worried. So for the time being, what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on just wearing down this back edge. Now the back edge of this thing doesn't have to be, it kind of possibly looks a bit odd if it's as narrow as the actual adjustable nut. And again, I just think I've said in this case appearance is a secondary really to function. So on this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to round off the back edge of this nut if I can, just to make it look a little bit smoother than when we started. But its purpose is I just want it to look okay. That's the back edge, and that doesn't look too bad to me. I'll fit the nut back in here nice and smooth. Everything's where it wants to be. Now again, the width is something that I'll just check here. It happens to be, this nut happens to be pretty much exactly the right width, so we don't want any sticking out either side. So in the same sort of vein, we can carefully reduce this down till it's just about bang on. Again, it's sort of by eye and by hand. It's not, there's no ultra precision way of doing this. You just have to sort of have a feel for it and take it down. Just try not to get an underhang. That's mainly what we're worried about. You want it to be roughly flush with this. And sort of stop when the going's good. And then a little corner on there just to take the sharp edge off. And then a little corner on the back end here, take the sharp edge off there. And now we've got a custom built seat or stand for this nut, and it's going to be nice and solid for this to sit on. It's slightly different at either end just because of the way that the stuff has gone, but truth is, if we go back to here and just take a little bit of a flatten out and reduce them to the same kind of height, and what we've got is the footing and a similar kind of gap going up each side. There we go. You'll get there'll be a gap on the edge. That's the thing about this method. Okay, so I think we're pretty close. Now the way to test this now is to place that out of the way. Remove this. Vacuum or brush. It's a good idea to get a wire brush on that. Brush off all of that dust. I was going to attach the tuners until I suddenly realised I can't because, well I can, but I've taken them off. So now what I'm going to just quickly do here is remove any obvious sticking up material that's going to get in the way of this custom nut base sitting flat. And there it is, sitting flat. I suppose it's about 0.5 millimeter overall, undercutting the overall width of this thing, but again it's I prefer that than to have to do it by hand. Now also width wise, looking at this, it is just slightly over on the front to back width, so what I'm going to do is just take that back down a little bit more. If I can grab this, doesn't need to be this far, sticky out this far at the back. Again, this is, you can keep going probably until you just hit the Tusq on this, and the main thing is you just want it to be even across both sides of the nut so it doesn't look odd. But we're very close to the actual width of the thing now, and I'm going to tip forward a bit just to get as square an edge as I can. And that looks very neat to me. Now that little bit of narrowing will make sure that it sits back in the original footprint of the nut slot, which if it was over, it just overhangs it and also stops it. This is quite, well, it's not exactly narrow, but it's sitting, the original slot fits that now, but there was a fair bit of gunge and paint still sitting on there. But what matters most is that it sits in here in the right place, and that the cover can comfortably fit without having to go any further. But that's a nice fit, okay, and the cover will go back on. Now what I'm going to do at this point, even though I've done all this nice tidying, and technically I shouldn't I? I should do the buffing now. If I'm going to get this to buff, it doesn't matter. Actually, the beauty of the buffing, of course, it doesn't matter if it touched the paintwork, because in fact it would only improve it. But just to keep everything sort of consistent, I will cover it off so that we don't end up with a shinier bit than anything else. But you know, the buffer is a great thing to have. It's not, well, actually, it's not as expensive as you think. It's only all in with the polishing compounds and whatnot. It's only a couple of £100, which for a pro quality paint buffer, finish buffer, is actually really good price. I'm just going to take a bit of time to cover this up too, because it's again, it would probably be great just to buff it. That is the final compound, so it would do nothing but polish it up. But we're not there, and I'm going to concentrate on kind of keeping it as close as it was. So to do this, I'm going to take my buffer outside, baby. Ooh, hasn't been out to play for a long time, and it lives tucked in a block here, so I can pull it out and it's and attach it in a minute to this most unsteady of workbenches that you can possibly imagine. But what I'll do for the fun, for the giggles, I'll take you with me, and you can enjoy the full majesty of a bufferation. It would help if I put you sort of upright-ish, something like that. Yeah, roughly. Look how dirty that is. Hasn't been used for a while. So this is what I do. Yes. There's no switch. It's probably what I should have invested in. A switch of sorts. Now, I've also put it on a block. Cleverly, I can only attach from one side on this unit here, and it's a very unstable thing. So I'm going to attach it there. You can see this whole thing rocks and rolls. Not brilliant. I'll also try and hoik it down on this end as well. much of a chance as possible. And then we will got to. Hold on a second, bear with me. Get this out. Get this out. Get this out of the way. Hold on, come on, be away. Come on, be away. These are dusty, but they're not much used. I think for fret buffing, I'm going to go with this one. Actually, you know what? I think I better go with the bigger one just to give me that distance back from the buffer. Because I don't want the body coming into contact with the metalwork. So this is obviously gives me a bit more outwards reach. A bit. Would you believe it? Hold on. That's it, run away. FedEx. Right. FedEx. Pearly Gates Trembucker. What they're waiting for. Okay, so planning, spin it, get some goo on it. This is the goo that goes with this goo. Sid's going to run a mile because he doesn't like the sound of it. Get the guitar. Meanwhile, just to make things more sensible, let's get the guitar stand out and off to one side. So I don't have to be, don't need to be reaching and doing things with one hand. It's trouble in the making. Okay, that will wobble, it'll make a noise. We don't have much time. Go. Stand by. Downwards. Now, I've done it in the wrong place, but quite nice. So I'm going to do it this side now because it's going downwards. Safer. think this might be my new thing. Ooh. Shiny-licious. Obviously get a bit of dust from the whole thing, but yeah, baby, I can go for that. There you go. The buffer at work. Designed primarily for buffing, obviously buffing finishes to a polish, which is great because you can, if you're like me, you like to hand apply your finishes. A buffer like that can take a hand applied finish that you flattened out yourself by hand and absolutely gloss it up beautifully. So what I was the experiment for me there was not so much whether it would buff well, because it's a nice slow speed buffer and it works really well. The experiment was whether it would rip off paper and chuck it all over the place in its operation, but actually it's handled that really well, even after I kind of wetted it up to remove the bulk of the fret dust, which is probably a good move to, just to make sure there's as little dust as possible impregnating the mops, as they're called. So that mop actually is one that I don't often use much, because the first stage mop is so good on the mop's a mop, but actually they're not. They are a bit different, but I'd be hard pushed to explain to you what the differences were. But the first stage mop that I use usually brings up such a good gloss that I kind of often don't go to the second one. So that one could possibly do more service as a fret polisher. But there you go. That's saved me, a bit of time setting it up and farting about, but it saved me a bit of time and got to a higher level of polish in terms of shine than I would have got by hand with the micro meshes. But clearly they're great for somebody who hasn't spent 300 quid on mop, motor and I saw a piece of wood there and I thought, has this finish come off? And it's wood from the board. A set of micro mesh pads for somebody who hasn't got a buffer is a pretty good investment. For a tenner you can bring a hand applied finish up to with the micro mesh plus some final polishing compounds by hand, you can really bring up a fabulous shine on a homemade or home finished guitar. The difficulty is getting it flat and not cutting through on the edges. That's always a likelihood, and to me it's so likely it makes the whole thing an absolute pain in the arse. I wouldn't want to do it by hand, but the micro mesh on a flat surface is or on a neck. Actually, surprisingly, a neck is really good. You can refinish a neck, and with micro mesh alone, you can bring up a very credible finish. And then, particularly if you then kind of take it back a little bit with, or if you just want to take it back with to a sort of wire wool finish, and you've got a lot of potential with home water-based poly applications. I really highly recommend it. Okay, so for low-tack paper, this actually felt surprisingly unlow-tack. I've got to be honest. It's done. No, in fact, yeah, this bit of sticky goo here is probably to do with the fact that I wet it more than it is to do with the paper. So I'll let the paper off, but it leaves me with a bit of a clean-up job to do, unfortunately. But we've still got nicely polished frets, and then I have to go and dismantle the buffer and do all the usual. So funnily enough, most of the things I've been doing recently have been a very satiny finish, generally as a sort of workable finish. But sometimes people like a highly glossed finish on the neck, and with a buffer like that for under 300 quid in total with all the compounds and wheels, I think that was a very good buy. I've yet to do my first buffed body. But the other thing it does do is it allows me to buff out tired finishes. So it's a kind of a reconditioner. It's a very good tool. You can really spruce up somebody's otherwise tired looking body. I wish it could do that for real. But very good for that. So, you know, again, and sort of earns its keep in that respect as well. So there we have nicely shined frets, buffed. And I think, providing they feel great to play, which I've no doubt they will, I could have just replaced the, you know, the whole hand process with the micro mesh paper. But we shall see. Of course, the other thing, I haven't got enough room to run that buffer in here permanently, so it does have to, it ideally gets run outside because it produces a lot of flakes and dust and stuff, and I neither want to breathe it in or have it coating everything in the workshop. But what's this in here? Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I can fit the nut, and what I'm really looking at is the fit. It's really nice, sits very well. So I would be happy to commit that nut. Just looking on this side, the paint is a little bit uneven where they've cut in with the paint, but I hate to start chiseling and filing at the surface of these. I'd rather, the thing with an adjustable nut is that providing that base sits there more or less square and we're comfortable with where it's sitting, and I can just line it now before I attach it. Providing that's good, then any kind of inaccuracy of the height or the position is catered for, taken care of with the adjustability of the nut. The adjustability of the nut itself. The reason I'm just doing a quick polish is because I think the smart move now would be to put the tuners back on, so that I can basically I can set this nut with the strings on it, and I can use the strings to exert the downward force on the nut rather than trying to clamp it or something. It's nice to have it set or glued under pressure, if you get what I mean, because that way it will reach its natural loaded level, even if there are some slight inaccuracies in the paint that's in the slot or whatever. As a piece of toolery, one thing I don't have, one of the many things I don't have, is actually a piece of is a file for filing those nut slots precisely. I've got a few files I could use, but something of a bog standard width. I've made a few temporary, makeshift things, but actually very hard to use by hand because you almost never get a square cut. You end up rocking things and moving things, and as soon as you do that, you do end up with. It's incredibly easy to quickly get yourself into a position where you've got a not flat slot, and that then runs the risk of rocking. You get the nut rocking in the slot and it just doesn't sit properly. And so some sort of tool that accurately cuts nut slots is a boon, but thanks, baby. Where did that go? Oh, God. There we go. Hands and knees. Oh, right. I had to get the nut anyway, didn't I? Now, where's the screwdriver? The screwdriver's gone for a walk. I'll have to dig that out. Oh, no, there it is. Yes, it's got the nut and the screwdriver bit. It's always the thing when you work over the top of the work surface like this. Be prepared to watch where things drop when they drop. I always put the screws back in first because they relocate the tuner, and then I tighten it up. And I've got it on setting of 1 on the torque, which is the minimum, which is enough for tuner screws. Okay, and then I'll worry about the final cleaning a bit later, but we just jump over to this side and then with the adjustable spanner, or if you've got a socket that does this, good stuff. Careful use of an adjustable spanner. Make sure it's exactly matched before you turn, or else you run the risk of scurfing off the, I don't know if that's a word, but sloughing off the corners on your nuts, things, whatever those things are that hold the things in place. Okay, so we have those things and those things. We're going to put in this thing and this thing, because we're going to need it just all together for a minute. Oh, because we're done, aren't we? Did I mean that to happen? Here we are, nearly done. Now the thing is, I was going to put on the old strings again, but given that everything's done, and given that we're going to use the strings, the only thing I'm going to use the strings for in this case is to hold the nut down to glue it, we actually might make better sense to fit a new set of strings at this point. In which case I'm going to cut these off, because I don't need a set of 11s as sacrificial strings, because it's very rare that guitars come through with them on. I don't mean that in any judgmental way at all, and hats off to anyone who plays with 11s, because I think I should learn myself. Come on, metal, get out there, Henry, you're not having the metal. You know it's not for you, it's for recycling. Honestly, what is he like? Now, over there, I'm going to use, it's a terrible thing to do, I'm going to use a tiny bit of cellulose thinners as a kind of cleaning agent. Very unhealthy thing to do, but what it does is it just cleans all the grit, dust or anything off the tips of my fingers before I go to restring anything. So it's a sort of, it's a thing. And before I put any strings on, and before I do the gluing and all of that stuff, I'm going to re-oil the fingerboard. Old Scott Grove. Oh, I've done it again. Old Scott Grove would kind of scoff at putting on oil. You know, his thing is, it's wood, you dumb, which was his catchphrase. He's very much a Marmite sort of guy. I've had a huge amount of respect for his points of view shared, although I recognised his approach was guaranteed to make him a lot of enemies, and actually I think ended up putting him, I don't think you can deny that it probably ended up putting him in under a lot of negative pressure, you know, where you get haters and actually, forgive me if I'm wrong, Scott, but it did look like it ended up costing you something in mental well-being, and that's a shame, because, you know, as a knowledgeable individual, he is spot on. His understanding of guitars, and he would say, anyway, it's typical sort of long rambling, dilly-dallying, rambling on. But you know, Scott Grove is an interesting character, very knowledgeable, and I think right about just about everything I've heard him talking about in terms of guitar setups and construction and playing and stuff. But he's an interesting dude, and I think one of the things that kind of, yeah, he's one of the first persons I kind of learned anything off on the internet. I liked his, I liked the way he presented his understanding, even if I didn't think the kind of swearing, and I'm not averse to swearing, I do plenty of it, but just, you know, you kind of set yourself up for sort of online warring if you call people dumb MFs. But anyway, I like his understanding and his knowledge, and he would say this whole thing with lemon oil and stuff is just an absolute joke. You don't need oil on wood, and all it really does is that it makes it look better. The guitar will pick up natural oil anyway. That's hence all the best old instruments look almost dark from, you know, whether it's violins or cellos, or, you know, it'll look grimy from years of love and playing. And you know, it's the same with the wood on a guitar neck. And sneeze. Excuse me. Right, so what I've got here, I have the strings ready to go, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hoik in, make my job a bit easier by first of all lining up all the tuner holes and keep all the tuner petals, or whatever they call them, knobs, to vertical. And that just makes finding the damn things much easier when you come to wind on, especially if you want to get all the load onto that nut before the glue dries, so it stays where you want it in perpetuity. So I'm going to make this a little bit easier by starting with loading the first 2 strings if I can. I always pull back the length of the fret when I sort of wind on, and I go over the top of the loose string first time round and under the loose string second time round. I'm kind of going to stop around about here because I don't want to do anything yet, do I? I think now is the time to chuck on a bit of glue into the mixture, because I'm going to need to blob that there, and we're good to go. Get the stick out of the way, get the nut into position, line it up. Actually, I'm stupid, it's the wrong string to be lined up ready to go, so I get the middle string up. Should have told me that. Why didn't somebody tell me that? I'll get all of this out of the way, including that one this way, the other one's the other way. Go up, come back one, wind on quickly, over the top, under the spare string, and then down onto the nut. And that's beginning to press it down. I'm going to go the same with the G string, if I can get it without the other string getting in the way. And I'll just end up basically with 2 sets of pressure on in the middle, holding the nut hopefully in place in the middle, and then if I need to push it any, I will, but I think it's in position from the start, which is good. If it's radically wrong, a small amount of glue like that will allow you to knock it off and start again. Knock it off. No, just looking at the positioning there, just looking at the outside positioning there. Yep, that's good. Happy with that. So from that point, I will add these others. I'll go outer E, since it's already in. Not too much pressure. Go high E. Ouch. High E. Just B out of the way for a minute. Thank you. Minding out not to knock over the super glue, which foolishly doesn't have its top on yet. Sorry, not a very good view from over there. Push these out of the way. Put on. Well, I didn't think the way things had conspired that I would actually get this done today, but it is done. And in fact, we can give Stuart a ring later on, because I know he wanted to have this for he gets a bit of time on Saturday to play, and I think he was kind of dreading missing his guitar playing time, which is a very cool thing. So, and with a new family, or a young family I should say, you know, that's precious you time. So definitely pleased to have got it done in the sort of downtime whilst waiting for the Seymour Duncan to arrive, which now it has. The world is a better place, and hopefully, it won't be tonight, but now I can spend all of tomorrow finishing Mark's T7 and wiring that pickup up, which I better rescue from out in the garden in a minute when I bring in the buffer and stuffer. Okay, there we go. Now I can see straight away, which I knew from when I put the thing in place, I have to let you know, that the nut is actually exactly where I want it, namely low enough. Where's my clippers? Low enough, I've lost them, here they are. Low enough so that it's actually, we're starting with the strings resting on the first fret. That's what we wanted to begin with. Strings on the first fret. Because everything else now will come up from there. So that's our ideal start position. Strings on the first fret, no playability, and then we work up from there. And we've got plenty of adjustment room in those grub screws to allow us to come all the way up to an ideal playing height. So that's what's nice about it. You've got that leeway once you've got it below the level of the first fret, slightly below. Then after that, everything's good because you're fitting it. There you go. Hitting the first fret. Oh, barely playing. We need it barely playing, but it's too low. So we're just going to literally lift it up with the adjustable grub screws, and I'll show you those in a minute. So the first thing we do is we just check it's all sitting there, and it's got loading on it, which is good. And then I can get the spanner, the doofer, and first of all we go down until it connects with the base of the thingy. And like there and there, and then basically I can just wind it up until we've got exactly the action we want on either side, and that is close to it. Oh, isn't that a beaut? Thank you. So I'll just get put it under normal loading now and get a first stretch out of everything and just see where everything sits. Perfect. Now what is interesting is you probably, even with this, I'm guessing that even with this heavy gauge string, you won't hear any pinging from the nut. Because the factory setting on this Tusq adjustable insert will cope with 11s all the way up to probably 12s. There you go. Said, as mentioned, it's tuning up nicely. Yeah, I remember, it wasn't long ago, the first time I saw those adjustable nut inserts, I thought, ooh, I can make that work for me. And what I've done since is actually make adjustable bone versions for Fender style guitars. It won't work quite so well. You can't use just you do need the bass on this because there's nothing supporting at the back, but when you have a slot like on the Fender guitars, a single bone piece, you can actually do it, and I have to tap and drill and tap my own grub screws, but it's really worth it. Okay, so now I can look at this, and actually I can put it as low as I like. You can hear that's just a little bit low, so I can kind of go up with that, and basically you can go to wherever you feel good, and that's what I like about it. The other approach is sort of dependent on where I stop. Actually, we've got the lowest possible action as well because I have yet to raise the bridge, so we're under a millimetre on the last fret, which is pretty amazing. I won't stop there, that is a bit too low for any guitar, but just goes to show what an SG neck can do with fret leveling. That was running at a millimetre, still only just about 1.1, so let's go up a little bit more. But this is, oh, that's 0.7 of a mil, it's too low, but it's playing, you know. It's just beautiful. Hey baby, so we got 1.1, 1.1. Let's get down a bit with that to just about the 1. We'll go 1.1, 1.1 to 1.2-ish. That will do me. And then I'll hit the headstock. I'll get another note. And continue stretching a bit. Wow, lovely. I'm listening now and feeling for linear, smooth tuning when you're pulling the string through the nut slots. Linear, it goes as you tune, it goes, and that's the sign that it's running smoothly. Like it, lovely. Then the final stage, oh no, not final, I'll check the intonation next, but penultimate stage is to just do a bit of manual stretching like this, just to get out any slack in the length of the string. Some people insist that nothing can stretch. This, I believe, both sides of the argument. That's a classic example of being torn. I believe those people who say, of course it can stretch, idiot, and I believe those people who say, of course it can't stretch, idiot, otherwise it would reach its stretching limit and then break. So I believe in both. See? Where did that come from? Okay, now having done all of that, now looking at the gaps and stuff, that's a little bit high on the bass side. I'm going to tweak that down a fraction, but it's so gorgeous to be able to do that. Now I'm going to do one more stretch on these chunky strings, and then we'll be ready for the intonation. You're still running on battery, which is pretty good stuff. Yeah, and then it's out to vote, go over to folks' parents' house, then come back. Oh no, then later on meet up with the band, and then after that, tomorrow, fit the new pickup and wire up Mark's guitar and pray that my clever circuit design works the way I hope it does. Nice. Okay, there it is. I'll get that what's it out, do the checking the intonation, and we'll see. Kind of the only good thing about the SG having its input over there is that you can do the intonation without worrying about pressing the jack socket into the table, which is quite often what ends up being the case with a Les Paul thing. Oh yeah, Les Paul or Les Paul. Okay, so let's have a go. What do you start with the E? Ooh, sharp on that G. Well, they're all over the place. Well spotted. I didn't even look to begin with. Now that's why. That's a ton off, a mile off, way sharp. Well, and it confirms it down there. So we get our adjustomatic screwdriver ratius. That's a little. This was a little sharp on the E. So we'll push the E a tiny bit away, won't we? And this brilliantly designed thing, just effortless adjustment, Mr. Paul Les Gibson. G was, what was it? Oh, yeah, G was just 100 miles off the mark, wasn't it? So since I've got so much to move on the G, I'm going to just slack it off for a second, so I can get some degree of access to the doofer without breaking the thing. So that's all the way in the wrong direction, ladies and gentlemen. And it can't go the other way because, well, let's try it there. But if that can't go any further back, then I'm going to have to remove all three damned doofers, which I hate. Don't you just hate Gibsons for that? Well, not Gibsons, but Gibson style designs. So it's sitting way back there, and now it looks like. Thank you. I thank you. Find the 12th fret, Samuel. Hurrah. That just saves me from having to get the whole thing off. Sharp. A little sharp. B's. B sharp. Hot diggity damn. It shouldn't be the case. Don't tell me it's a duff string. Well, the E looks sharp, but the B shouldn't be sharp. According to folklore and legend, the B should be in between these things. And if it's not, then I'm going to have words with it. Now this, what a crap bridge. Oh, I do hate these things. Look, it's come out. And this is now in the way, and that's now stuck over that, and that won't fit on that. Oh, what crap. Where am I going with this? Oh yeah. Back, forwards, forward, backwards. Well, that should be somewhere about right, but that fella shouldn't be as far back as that. It's not right, you know. Damn it, this has got to come off. How bleeding annoying is that? I hate these guitars. Well, I don't really hate them, but I hate them a bit. Just enough, I hate them. So what we've got here is a situation where the amount of travel room sounds like a cheap budget hotel, the amount of travel room needed now to intonate this guitar properly is greater than we've got in the crappy little bridge. And this is not helped by the stupidness of the design of this crappy little bridge, in which 3 of the saddles are facing one way and 3 are facing the other. And because they make them like little wedges, some of the size distance on one side excludes you travelling. It's like a block that stops you travelling back any further, if you get what I mean. Anyway, the net result is that when you can't intonate, these little suckers need to be turned round in order to allow you to intonate and get back to where you need to go. And for that to happen, you have to start by removing the little restraining wire, which itself is an utter pain in the what's it. And then you have to take out each of these little things one by one, which never want to come out. They just want to, well, that one's coming out, but they generally want to throw themselves all over the floor. And then you turn each one of these things round to gain you the backward travel that you need of another 3 millimeters, which they could have designed this thing to have given you in the bloody first place. So that's just an inkling of how much I can't stand them. Now, if we don't get anywhere with this particular thing, then I'm going to do something else, which is a possible, and that is I will bin the set of strings and start again. Well, no, sorry, I'll bin the top 3 strings. It might as well be a whole lot. It is, I've said before, if it doesn't follow the expected pattern, and there's something well out, and like I'm suspecting the B might be, then it's chuck the string. And luckily, Stuart's brought 2 sets of strings, and it may end up costing us 2 sets of strings to get this intonated, but it will just be a defect in the string that I will not be able to tell you why it is, but it just is. And you'll see that having dumped it, it'll go back to intonate, or it'll miraculously seem to intonate, whereas it wouldn't before. And that is just how it hangs. It's very odd, but it's very mysterious and magical. And so I tip all these forward, hopefully, to allow me to get this little thing back in, and then I lift that, hopefully, crudely over these 6 little things that want to throw themselves all over the floor, and they're still trying to do that, and they just will not play ball. So you can see this, what an absolute pain in the... You can't put it over them and then line them up, or then push the ends of the little retaining clip in, because it won't play ball. So you have to push that over the top of there and hope to trick it. And then you have to get the other end and do the same, whilst not deforming and distorting this stupid little spring circlet thing that you're stretching within an inch of its stupid little life. Do I sound bitter? Well, it's only because I am. Thank you, neighbour. So that goes under there, and that supposedly retains those. Ha ha. Right, after all of that kerfuffle, we go back under here. I'll get them the right way around, first of all. And we put this back under here with our newly bought adjustment travel. And let us see. Now, judging by the way these strings should be fitting, we should have a familiar pattern of 2 sets of 3, and if we haven't got that, it's where I begin to suspect, oh, we've got a bit of, what have we got here? A bit of nylon coming off the tuning. Yeah, it's when we get to this stage, I suspect that the string is faulty, and that's the point I consider replacing it. Now, meantime, I've got strings tangling up other strings here. Now we've lost a bit of the good old stretching work that we did, so I have to make sure we do some more of that. Well, not so much, but just enough to, because we're now recoiling the strings along the around the thing. You know what I mean. I need another note. What is wrong with this thing? Do as you're told. Bit of a stretch, try not to break these now once already slightly weakened strings, because we had them off and on once, thanks to the beauty of Mr. Gibson's patent, whoever designed that bleeding bridge. Okay, back to reality. Are you working? Back to the tuner. Oh, we're way back on all of these now. That's the funny thing. I'm going to zip inside and get my other tuner. I don't like this. I may have to bin this. 1 second. Do the Korg. Let's do the Korg. Thank you. That's what I really believed was happening. Funny that, isn't it? Right, I'm going to one more time, 2 more times, just set this to one side, and I'm going to position these two where I think they should be. Oh, I hate this bridge. Oh my god, how much do I hate this bridge? Let me count the ways. Right, stay there, and you come to here. I mean, it doesn't even work when you've got it in place, you know. That's what's crap about it. And then you can't get to it because it's directly in line, first of all, with the strings, and if it's not in line with the strings, it's directly in line with the pickups. It's all just a gargantuan pile of crap design. But hey, people just seem to love it. Probably get lots of people ringing up, you know, sending comments saying what an absolute a-hole I must be to think to criticise the Lord and Master's bridge design. Now the problem I've got here now is I've only got a certain amount of reach going in that direction too, and that's what is the absolute pain in the Yanksy about this stupid design. First of all, they don't actually sit in the right place, so when they're up they sit back, when they're down they sit in a line, so you have to figure out where the hell they actually do sit, which is never where and they move backwards and forwards too, like brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So what am I actually doing with this? Right, sending it backwards. Thank you, that's where I want it. If this isn't pretty much right, I'm going to just burn it. Right, start again. Right, let's go for G. Okay, slightly sharp. See, is not. Yeah, well, that confirms actually what we had to do. So I'm going to push this last little bit of available room in the entire bridge. We've turned they've turned the thing round altogether now, and if this doesn't get it to intonate, then the bridge is in the wrong place, and that's all there is to it. Great, eh? But it's Mr. Gibson knows. He knows the right thing. He's the man. He's the guy. Pretty much on there, tiny bit back, so we're just within range, thankfully. I can just bring this back a bit, can I? Would you be so kind as to settle down? Yeah, that'll do. Yep, spot on. Pretty good. Damn it. Okay, let's pull the last bit of stretch out of these. And then we'll do one more. Thingying. Intonating. You've got to remember when you even touch the neck like that, it's so flexible, you put it out of tune just by touching it. Oh God, no. No, please, Lord, help me. Go the other way, back a bit, thank you. Back to the end of your reach. This is at the extent of the limits of its travels to intonate properly. You're just there, I think. We can safely say it's right on the edge. Yeah. Yeah, just about on. Oh, there we go. It's the E and the G that have just kind of run to the edge of their limits. Damn thing doesn't even stay down when you're trying to intonate it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Great, done finally. So there we are. We're actually 1.5 on there and 1.2 on there. We'll go down a tiny fraction on there and stay where we are on the treble side and just retune. Done. I think I'll stick with this tuner in the future. Bit more accurate than that other thing. Alright, we're good. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Stuart's SG with added lead, changed over bridge saddles, intonated properly, given some extra weight, given some extra crackle removal in the pots. Oh, got to put the thing back on. Comes with one of these things, which I've got to find one spare one. what they call them, you know, hex key to go with the little adjustable saddle nut, but a fabulous little piece of technology, innovated by yours truly at a fraction of the expense that it would cost you to buy a working unit from Gibson. But it's a combination of a bit of milliput modelling clay and Graphtec's wonderful Tusq nut. Adds up to a really excellent combo. Now, somewhere around here, I'm just going to check, is this the right thing for this? I think it is the right thing. Does it fit exactly 100%? Does it? Is it exactly the same? No. Yes. No. Throw it on the floor. I'm going to do a little measure here. We have 1.1, 1.3. Can't be true. 1.2, 1.2, 1, 1.1, 1.2. As close as darn. 1.1. Yeah, it's the same. Right. I need to keep that one for my daily use. This one I'm going to stick on a little bit of tape, and we are done, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get on with the rest of today's weird and wonderful things, which don't include they're so small. Right, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to stick it to the scratch plate. That's a sensible home for it. There you go. Brilliant. Done. Thanks for sticking it out. Bye.